Welcome to Footballing Stories with me, Jake.
And me, Jack.
And today we're going to delve into the life, the legacy of Johan Cruyff. Jake, how much do you know about Johan Cruyff?
I know that he was a very good footballer and an even better manager.
Even
we'll
better
see.
manager?
Yeah.
It's debatable. Well, he's referred to as the father of modern football for obvious reasons to myself, but maybe not to you because I've been researching it for a while. And as you know, Johan Cruyff's one of my favourites, like I've been saying for a while. The stuff that he was doing in terms of pioneering the philosophies in football that we use today, the turn that everyone knows him for. 3 Ballon d'Ors is difficult to argue against Ballon d'Ors. And he was a big pioneer and catalyst of total football, of course. Total football, not invented by him, but the philosophy of being fluid, basically, with your system that we see quite a lot in modern football. Not as much, but it's basically the idea that if a left-back drives forwards and becomes a winger, someone else drops in at left-back and the shape's held. So he wore the number 14. Did you know that?
I didn't.
Do you know any other good players who wear the number 14?
Not off the top of my head, to be fair.
There's a massive one. Thierry Henry. It's probably between the two of them. Who do you think is the better player between Thierry Henry and Johan Cruyff?
I mean, Cruyff's more influential, but I mean, Henry was probably the better player. I mean,
okay.
Henry on his prime is one of the best players this country's ever seen. So
yep.
Obviously I don't think Cruyff ever played in England, but no. So
he was close.
Yeah,
he was close.
I would say I'd have to say Henry in my opinion, but that's why we're here today, to find out more about the man, because you know he's one of these people in football that everyone knows his name, but everyone doesn't know his story. So that's why we're telling it.
And you don't know too much about it. Well, just to let you know that in 1999, Cruyff was voted European Player of the Century, held an election by the International Federation of Football History and Statistics. And he came second only behind Pelé in the World Player. So he's highly regarded by some. And of course, when you're looking at the best players that have existed, he's always up there in the lists.
Yeah.
Just to go over a few of his philosophies, I've got a quote here that's quite good. At the heart of what I've learned as a player is that above all else, you need 4 things: good grass, clean changing rooms, players who clean their own boots, and tight net goals. Or tight goal nets, rather. So a couple of things that I find really interesting in that. The good grass is looking... I think it's one of them things, if you set like a good environment for people, they're always going to thrive within it. Of course, my background's in coaching, and it's one of them things that you want to do in a presentation. If the presentation's good and the environment's good, that you feel more part of it and you take it a lot more seriously. And clean changing rooms part of that as well. You know, you're more likely to look after the changing rooms if they're clean for you as a player, and them sort of things setting the environment for a club, I think, is one of the reasons why it became so successful later on. I've got a really interesting one. Players who clean their own boots, because there's players right now in the Premier League who would not clean their own boots. And yeah, I mean, in terms of accountability, like just having that as a rule is you know, it's not necessarily just that rule, is it? It's more talking about players who are able to take themselves accountable, people who are down to earth, because as a footballer, especially as a footballer who's come from a background where they've not had a lot of money, I can only imagine that superstar freedom that they get as soon as all the money comes in. It's no wonder why people do silly things that you see in the press. They're only young people at the end of the day, like people who are coming through earning 50 grand a week at 19, 20. It's no surprise that they go off their rails. So, yeah, he was a catalyst of total football. Rinus Michels developed this, and he's known for total football, really. He's called the father of total football, which referred to that quite a bit. So, yeah, a tactical system in association with football in which any outfield player can take over the role of any other player in a team. Can you think of any teams right now that use a form of total football? Because there's one that screams out to me.
I mean, Ajax are still pretty possession heavy, which I know is where he started his career. In terms of the Premier League, I'd say Manchester City.
Yeah.
They're probably the obvious one, but again, their manager Pep Guardiola was heavily influenced by Cruyff,
Yeah.
so it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think nowadays in football you see quite a lot of structure, especially down the leagues where you've not got as much talent, technical talent as Johan Cruyff had when he was playing, and also what he was coaching. Most of his stuff was done right at the top level, so you can take liberties with that sort of thing. You see it from people like Ancelotti, who are quite happy to just let their players get on with it, and of course he's had so much success in the Champions League with Real Madrid, because he's got these players, he can let them just get on with it with less discipline. Man City, I think, is a great one. As you said, he's been in contact with Cruyff throughout his whole development as a youngster. Like, he came through with Cruyff when he broke through into the first team, and we'll get there. But when he was talking tactics, when he was talking pre-match stuff, Pep Guardiola was always there, as Rinus Michels was for Cruyff. So it's only, it's only natural that all of that stuff would go into him. And I've seen a couple of things saying Michels, Cruyff, Guardiola into the new one, which is Arteta, of course. But I don't think Arteta plays quite as fluidly as Man City do right now. Obviously, they've got players like Zinchenko who play as inverted wing backs, but it's quite different and a bit more structured. And maybe that's because they've got younger players and a lot less technical players in the middle of the pitch. So,
Yeah.
1947, April 25th, born in Amsterdam, Hendrik Johannes Cruyff. I didn't know it's supposed to be pronounced Cruyff. I'm not going to pronounce it Cruyff for the rest of
It sounds
It's
awful.
going to be Cruyff.
It sounds awful.
And that's probably because it's coming from me rather than.
I do apologise to the Cruyff family if I've just said that it sounds horrible, but
not ideal.
Right.
He grew up 2 miles away from the Ajax Stadium, and his parents owned a greengrocers a couple of 100 metres from the Ajax Stadium as well. And his dad Hermanus was a huge Ajax fan. He grew up in Bettendorp, which is referred to as the Concrete Village, which was built in World War One as affordable housing. So it's... Oh, I've got a quote here. Originally constructed between 1923 and 1925, the Concrete Village, as it translates from Dutch, was built as an experimental construction of around 2,000 buildings. The purpose of the experiment to test out a variety of different low-cost poured concrete building techniques to combat brick shortage in the Netherlands. While about half of the buildings are built from traditional brick and mortar, around 1,000 of them are built using a one of 10 different styles of concrete construction. Not too sure what that means, but I'm assuming it just basically means that because of the brick shortage, they had to use massive concrete buildings, which is what it looks like in the pictures. I got this from Atlas Obscura, which paints quite a good picture. The style of buildings is angular brutalism that has been compared more favourably to Art Deco styles of construction. The neighbourhood is built around a central rectangle of shops and commercial space called the Brink, from which a handful of roads splay off in different directions. So it was a working class upbringing. Of course, 1947, just after the World War II malarkey. So it was a time where there wasn't a lot, and a lot more time was spent on the streets. And for him as well, because he lived in such a, well, I wouldn't call it necessarily ugly, because that's all he knew, but it was definitely small. He shared a bedroom with his older brother, and so therefore most of his time was out playing football on the streets or playing football at Ajax. You see the curb, this is a quote from him, you see the curb isn't actually an obstacle, but that you can turn it into a teammate for a 1-2. So thanks to the curb, I was able to work on my technique. You see at the moment recommendations for people in pre-season just passing the ball off a log so that the ball comes back to you in a weird way, or passing against a wall, and being able to control that. So it was interesting seeing like things that he's saying and the practices at the moment in the coaching industry, because it was a while ago. Like, you've got to bear in mind this was 50, 60 years ago, and football was a completely different game. But his philosophies and his learnings from his own childhood are still relevant to today, which I can't imagine much of the football was. Another thing that I thought was really good, when you fall on concrete, it hurts, and of course you don't want to get hurt. So when playing on football, you're also trying not to fall. One of the big things that he's an advocate for, which I found interesting, was playing without studs in young players. So
really?
So that it was a lot easier to fall over and they had to develop a sense of balance. Of course, today, futsal was massive. So you get a lot of indoor football playing in halls that are basically accredited for the same reasons that he comes up with. He's sort of there with his ideas, and the best coaches, in my opinion, are able to take scenarios of how a person's developed and deconstruct them to figure out what exactly it was, and then reconstruct them so that it can be replicated. So that can be like how to learn, how to play a certain system, how to phrase and articulate a way of playing so that it's a lot more understandable. But things like this is seeing, okay, my upbringing wasn't playing on grass all the time. I didn't have a lot. I played on concrete, and this is the benefits I've had for it, and how they can use them benefits for kids that did have more than him, and still give them the same benefits when they were growing as players, so that they provide a lot more technical players as a national team. So in school, he took a ball into classes with him and passed it between his feet under the desk, which meant he kept getting kicked out of the class. But he was just football obsessed from a young age, like passing it from left foot to right foot. And it only makes sense when you watch him and his clips. Like, he's mastered the football. And he speaks later of Mikel saying, like, you've got to master the football before you're even allowed to touch it on a pitch, because they're so focused on getting that perfect every single time. Cruyff helped Henk Angel, the Ajax groundsman and a friend of Hermanus's, so his dad, with various tasks when not training from the age of 5, and so spent a lot of time at Ajax when he was growing up. So Henk would often eat meals at Johan's home after his wife passed, and then Arend van der Vel used to join too. Arend van der Vel being a player for Ajax at the time, a young player, because his home was too far away to go home after work, because he lived right in the north of Amsterdam, and he needed to be able to eat between work and training. So growing up, he heard a lot of what was going on within Ajax, and he just became obsessed with it. In 1957, he officially joins Ajax at the age of 10. He had been training with Ajax since the age of 6, but that was unofficial. And so at that point, he's straight into the academy, and he's playing. He said at the time he was a scrawny kid, and that if going by today's standards with statistics and things like that, he just wouldn't have been accepted, which is interesting to think of. And they have changed their philosophy quite a lot with that. The Dutch coaches, you see the Dutch national team are pretty small. Like, you don't have that screening process that other players do. Like, you don't have to be 6'4" to start to be able to kick a ball. You know, there's nothing like even Barcelona would have had at the time. They were not accepting anyone below a certain height straight away as a prerequisite before coaching them. Something I don't agree with, but I see why they do it at the top level. You can teach a 6'2" player how to pass a ball, but you can't teach a person who can pass a ball to be 6'2". So that's why they think of it. Whether you agree with it or not, I mean, some of the players that have come through are small. Like, thinking players like Gary Medel playing centre-back. Like, he was still a good centre-back. And a bit of a chihuahua. But them sort of players just wouldn't exist with these sort of things. And Johan Cruyff as well. He wasn't the exception. But because of Ajax's policies, he was able to play football. A big event, 1959, the 8th of July, his father dies of a heart attack. So he's age 12 at this point. And to give you a bit of context about what kind of man his dad was, he had a glass eye and bet people 5 cents to see who could stare at the sun the longest. No, he's described as a cunning man, and he was a big part of the reason why Johan was into football so much. And Ajax, because of that, became a lot bigger part of his life. With the absence of his father, it was just filled with football. Johan he says that he's not particularly religious, as he wasn't a dedicated churchgoer, and he used to talk to his father after his death. So whenever he was walking or cycling by where he was buried, which was not that far away from the Ajax stadium, he would ask for help with big decisions. But he started thinking, is this just made up? Am I just placebo here, thinking things aren't happening? So he asked his dad if he was in his presence to stop his watch. And his watch stopped overnight. His father-in-law owned a watch shop, so he brought it in. His father-in-law had a look and nothing was wrong, and so got it going pretty quickly. But by the next morning it stopped again. And he said out loud, he believed in the presence, and he doesn't have to worry about the watches, and the watches never stopped again. So even though he's not religious, he always feels that presence of his father growing up. So calls Henk Angel his second father, who was a friend of Hermanus's, and Of course, the groundsman goes on to marry his mother, who
Fair
Ajax
play.
gave. Yeah, he worked at Ajax. Ajax helped her by giving her a job as a cleaner. So there was also the thing where Johan felt slightly indebted to the club because it was helping out his family. And just interestingly, Johan was on the Dutch national team for baseball as a catcher until the age of 15. And it was just,
Okay.
but through this experience, he discovered the need to know what you're going to do with the ball before you get it. So it's something that's transferable. It's one of his big talking points when it comes to teaching young players to try and think a pass ahead. So before you receive the ball, what are you going to do for it? And it's obvious if a player receives the ball, they're not going to know what to do. Their first touch isn't going to be where you want it, so you can speed up play that way. It's just interesting that he learnt it from there, and of course it shows his athletic ability.
As I say, it's not a rarity to have multi-sports for athletes doing multiple sports to learn different things about it. So it's interesting to see. Baseball's an odd choice, I will say, but like you said, it makes sense with the whole thinking forward and positioning and stuff like that.
Just on that, it's common over in Germany. I'm pretty sure in their setup, it's not normal to specialise in a sport until you get a bit older. Like I looked up, Manuel Neuer played tennis until he was 14. He was also
makes sense for the reactions.
Yeah, well, yeah, you could put two and two together a little bit easier, can't you, with them two? Even the German teams, Bayern Munich, have scrapped their under-9 and under-10 youth teams. They only start at under-11 now, partially because they don't want to apply the pressure to the teams, to the players, but also because it's important to get that background as well. A lot of the skills that you develop in sports are transferable. So, 1964, the 15th of November, he makes his first team debut, scoring in a 3-1 defeat to GVAV Rapidius.
Go on, Johan. They lost the game, but he got the goal.
Who later became Groningen, FC Groningen. And he was age 17 at the time. At the time, he also played as the goalkeeper for the third team. So, in his debut season, I've got the stats here. He played in 10. He scored 4 and he assisted 2. At that time, Ajax finished 13th out of 16 teams and survived relegation by 3 points. Feyenoord winning the league. At the time, players that he came through with, Piet Keizer is someone that he put in his favourite 11. He thinks he's in the best 11 and he's someone he played with a lot. I think he's really well known in the Netherlands. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Okay, I hadn't before this either, and he meets his wife Danny at Piet's wedding later on.
Oh,
so he's an important character in Cruyff's life. They used to play on the same side, both as attackers. In the 65-66 season, Rinus Michels comes in and takes Ajax from a struggling team to the top. And Johan forms a bond with him because they talk about tactics, philosophies, pre-match tactics. He would always be involved in them chats. And he developed most of his footballing IQ and systems off of this. And, they've got such a good relationship that Johan's children now call him Uncle Rinus. Or they did when they were younger. So from 13th in the league, they went all the way up to top, finishing above Feyenoord and qualifying for the European Cup. So before this, Ajax really weren't the big team in the Netherlands.
No.
This was the start for them of being what they are today and developing something new. And in the 66-67 season, Cruyff plays 11 times, scores 8 goals and gets 3 assists. Ajax finish top, qualifying for the European Cup again. I remember now the stats for this were wrong because it's only the European Cup and the domestic cup. Johan Cruyff actually finishes top goal scorer with 33 goals in the league in 34 games. But
bit of a jump.
Yeah, it is. He starts playing for the Netherlands as well. He makes his debut in a 2-2 against Hungary. He does score in his debut and he plays for 90 minutes. He plays 4 times that year. So he goes from making his debut to playing 3 times against East Germany, Denmark, Hungary and CSSR. In the European Champion Clubs Cup, which is nowadays the Champions League, they got knocked out of the quarterfinals So they did incredibly well. Got knocked out by Duke Le
Not
Prague.
bad at all, yeah.
And they only got knocked out in the second leg as well by 1 goal. So moving on to the 67-68 season. He plays 33 times across all competitions, scores 29 goals and gets 18 assists. Funnily enough, Ajax win the league, winning 27 of their 34 games, only losing 3. And having a goal difference of 77, which is pretty darn impressive.
Christ. Yeah.
In the European Champions Clubs Cup, they get knocked out at the first round, though, by Real Madrid, which is pretty unlucky to draw. This time he's still playing as an attacking midfielder. You've got to bear that in mind. So 29 goals, 18 assists coming from central midfielder. Of course, in a total football system where he can go anywhere, pretty much, but he's still playing slightly deeper. I was wondering, where did you think Cruyff played?
I always thought he was a winger because of the turn, because of the way he could swivel around a defender. But tell me more.
Well, he played once that season as right winger. I mean, he played a couple of times as centre forward, but most of it was attacking midfielder. And later on in his career, he does play striker or centre forward, and also centre mid a little bit later on. At this point, Cor Costa, who's Danny's father, negotiates a deal on behalf of him. So before this, players really didn't have representation from agents. And that's what he stepped in and did, for the better or for the worse. Johan, in his book, said nowadays agents don't seem as bothered about the needs for the player, whereas Cor Costa was, because of course it was a lot more personal. Whether it was the start of something a bit downhill, I mean, we know what the impact has been at the moment for agents with Raiola and things like that. It makes it incredibly difficult and takes the mick a little bit. But anyway, that was involved. Very unheard of. Ajax didn't want to negotiate with him at all. And they refused to see him at one point. But eventually they gave him.
Awesome.
Moving on to the 68-69 season. He plays 43 times, scores 34, 23 assists.
Pretty consistent, this fella.
He's decent, but Ajax don't win. They get beaten by Feyenoord. They win 1 less game. And they draw 1 less as well. They lose 2 more games. Bearing in mind, though, they had a 56 goal difference compared to Feyenoord's 52. So it's close up there. But what that does mean is they qualify for the Intercities Fairs Cup instead. In the Champions League that season, they do make it to the final, only to lose 4-1 to Milan. And that year, in December 1968, he gets married to his wife, Danny. In 69-70, plays 46 times, 33 goals, 34 assists, and they finish first as well.
What a surprise.
100 goals for that season. They only lose 1 game.
Oh my God.
They win the KNVB Becker, which is the domestic cup. And in the Intercities Cup, they get knocked out by Arsenal in the semi-finals, which I thought was quite funny. 70-71 season, scores 27, assists 15 in 37. Ajax finished behind Feyenoord again. This time he's playing half the games as a centre forward, half of them as an attacking midfielder. He's progressing a little bit further up the pitch. And in the European Champion Clubs Cup, they beat I can never pronounce this one.
Panathinaikos or whatever.
In the final.
The Greek club.
Yeah, they win the Champions League against them, the Greek club, and he gets 1 assist in that one, plays the full 90 minutes, and they also win the cup. So just because they didn't win the league doesn't mean it's not successful. At this point, Chantal, Johan's first daughter, is born of November 1970. So at this point, he's a young father, and his favourite coach at the time leaves, and in steps Stefan Kovacs. This year was successful on numbers, 45 appearances, 33 goals, 26 assists, and Ajax do finish third. He's the top goal scorer. He's playing as a centre forward now. They win the cup. They win the UCL against Inter, and he wins his first Ballon d'Or in 1971, and his second daughter, Suzia, is born in January 1972.
So success on the pitch and off it, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you could put it that way, but with the story, not so much. So the second season, he scores 22 and 20 and 22 assists in 36 games. Ajax win again, and Louis van Gaal is signed, but he doesn't play. Just thought that was quite a cool name to put up there. They beat Juventus 1-0 in the Champions League, and they win the Super Cup against Rangers, and he becomes the captain of Ajax and the Dutch national team in the World Cup qualifiers. And of course, they do qualify for the World Cup. In a group against Norway, Belgium, and Iceland, they go unbeaten. And the highlight of that is their 9-0 battering of Norway, where he played centre forward and scored 2. At this point, though, Stefan Kovacs, he's quite a laid-back guy. So Mikkels is a lot more disciplined in the way that he coaches. He expects players to be on time. He fines people if he finds they're going out late. And Kovacs isn't like that at all. And it heavily contrasts. And Johan, because of it, he feels he needs to step in as captain to call out their bad behaviour or, things that they're not doing. And it causes a lot of confrontations there. Behind his back, before going back to the season in pre-season, the players vote behind his back for Piet Kaiser to become the new captain because they think Cruyff is too self-serving and he feels backstabbed by that. So he asks Cor Costa to force him a move. Wow. So he signs for a team for a world record fee at age 26. Do you know what that team is?
Is it Barcelona?
It is Barcelona. And do you know who his manager was at Barcelona?
Oh, no. I don't know them that well.
Rinus Mikkels. So he followed his
Really?
previous man. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Followed his previous man. Plays 28 times. 19 goals, 4 assists. And Barcelona finished first.
Wow.
Which is a
Very
massive. Yeah. For Barcelona, bearing in mind, they hadn't won in 14 years. So that's their first. And Cruyff wins the Ballon d'Or that year. But interestingly, it wasn't Mikkels who brought Cruyff in, because Mikkels had chose Gerd Müller to be his number one striker. But wow. Cruyff didn't know that at the time. He came in and did such a good job that he just displaced him completely. And 1974 World Cup is the year where Johan Cruyff and the Dutch team made it to the final and lost 2-0 to West Germany. Or 2-1 rather. 2-1. He got
Is this the invention of the turn?
Pardon?
Is this the invention of the turn? Didn't he do it at a world stage?
I think he did do it. I don't know. It was definitely a team that played in blue, wasn't it? I'm assuming it was.
Yeah.
Funnily
Italy
enough,
played in blue, or Argentina.
Well, they played Uruguay, Sweden, Bulgaria, Argentina, East Germany.
Could be in Argentina.
It could really have been. But there was something really controversial about that final. The German national team and the Dutch national team were sponsored by Adidas. But Johan Cruyff only wore 2 stripes instead of the 3 because he had an exclusive deal with Puma. So he didn't want to wear the 3, so he removed a stripe himself, and that really pissed off Adidas. And Puma tried to power play off it as well. So they were saying, well, he hates Adidas, this and this. And it became such a big thing in football at the time. It was one of them things that was all over the newspapers. Just interestingly, in the same season, so his son, Jordi Cruyff, his due date was the 17th of February. And Cruyff and Danny wanted to go back to Amsterdam to deliver under the same gynecologist as their 2 daughters. But Barcelona had an away game at Real Madrid on the same day. So Rinus Mikkels asked to bring forward the C-section operation to the 9th. And so Jordi is born on the 9th so that Johan can fly to Spain. And Barcelona beat Madrid 5-0. And then Johan flies back to Amsterdam to pick up his family. Yeah, it's just crazy how much it evolves, like changing the date for birth of his son to play in this game.
You couldn't imagine that now. You just couldn't imagine that now. That's so rogue.
It's just crazy, like how prominent in his life this being football, to change such an event. It's funny, in this game, Mikkels asked Johan to play a bit deeper because the Real Madrid back line defends zonally. And it would just give them no one to mark. And this is really the birth of the trequartista role. So Catalonia at the time is under dictatorship, and Johan needs to register his son in Spain. So the registrar tells Johan that his son's name can't be Jordi, as it's the patron saint of Catalonia, and it would just be impossible. But he wasn't best pleased about that, and he shows the Dutch birth certificate and convinces the registrar to put down Jordi anyway, because his legal documents would all say Jordi, apart from that one. And yeah, the registrar agrees to do it, which he puts down partially to the result against Madrid, because apparently it just raised spirits so much that it had a real influence around the whole of Catalonia. And in that season, he wins his third Ballon d'Or. That's the final one he wins. But he does come third in 1975.
Fair play.
So,
Fair play.
in 74-75, he plays 38 times, only scores 7, gets 4 assists and 5 yellow cards.
He dropped off.
Yeah, he spoke about being used politically by someone, and there was an incident apparently where he didn't say something to a ref, and a ref sent him off about it. But it's interesting. It's difficult when it's coming from his own mouth and his own verbatim, because you never know what's going to happen. That year they got knocked out of the UCL by Leeds. And
well, to be fair, Leeds were a big team back then. Yeah,
they were.
Can't just disrespect Leeds there.
Real Madrid finished first in the league. Barcelona finished third. Real Madrid they finished 8th last year, but they still kept their manager, Miljan Mijanovic, from North Macedonia, which I thought was mad, going from 8th to 1st. And you look at the squads, it's not even that different. And the next year, 75-76 season, he plays 38 times, only scores 8, 1 assist. And Real Madrid again win. So Miljan's he's winning everything. Like, I've never heard of him. Have you heard of him?
No. And I just love how he just changed, he's changing everything, even the C-section of his wife. Like, he's mental.
That's Rinus Michels.
Oh.
So Miljan is the coach of Real Madrid at the time.
Okay.
So Real Madrid finished 8th, and then they finished 1st, and then they finished 1st again.
I've never heard of either one. That's the crazy thing. It's like influential people.
It is. It's weird. Because he's of course, called the father of total football. I think we've all heard of total football, haven't we?
Yeah.
So you would expect for everyone to have heard of him, and I think he's shadowed a little bit by Cruyff, because Cruyff was such a successful player that people just don't talk about him at all, and it's criminal because he's such an influential coach. Of course, the one that gave all of his teachings down to Cruyff. At the time, though, Rinus Michels leaves, and in comes Hens Weisfeller from Germany. But they fall out, and Weisfeller gets sacked after a year and blames Cruyff. According to Cruyff, that's the only time that or the only person he's ever disagreed with as a head coach. But they just don't get on at all. And I found out Cruyff played 2 games for PSG in the 1975 Paris tournament, because he was a fan of designer Daniel Hector, who was the then president of PSG. I don't think you could get away with that anymore. That's for sure.
No, definitely not.
It's so random. Like, you see sometimes now you get like Borussia Dortmund entering them tournaments that are on YouTube, the mixed ones where the women's national team enter a team, Dortmund enter a team, some esports team enters a team, and they just play like a tournament. But it's so peculiar. The next year, 76-77 season, he plays 36 times, scores 18 goals. Barcelona finished second to Atletico Madrid. But interestingly, Miljan Mijanovic has finished 9th with Real Madrid this season. So he's gone from back-to-back titles down to 9th. But he's still the Real Madrid manager. He's still doing his thing for North Macedonia. 77-78 season, plays 42 times, scores 11, 3 assists, Real Madrid win again. And by that time, unfortunately, our boy...
Bit of a yo-yo club, Real Madrid, aren't they?
Miljan got sacked, and Maloney took over. So, it was a good run. It was a good run for the North Macedonian.
He'll take it. He'll take it. A few titles back to Macedonia.
At this point, Cruyff retires from international football. So in October 1977, having helped the national team to qualify for the upcoming World Cup, and the Dutch finished second in the World Cup again. He
Wow.
said to play at a World Cup, you have to be 200% okay. There are moments where there are other values in life. Do you know what that was referring to?
No.
Okay, a quote from him. It was the 17th of September, and I was at home in our apartment complex in Barcelona, watching a basketball game on television, when the doorbell was rung by what looked like a courier delivering a parcel. When I opened the door, though, I got a gun pressed against my head and was ordered to lie on my stomach. Everyone was at home, the children were in their room, and the man told Danny to lie on the floor as well. I tried to talk to him. Do you want money? What do you want? I was tied up and roped to a piece of furniture. To do that, the man had set his gun down briefly, and at that moment Danny got to her feet and ran out the room and out of the building. The bastard ran after her. I was able to free myself and grabbed his gun so that he couldn't get a hold of it again. There was so much screaming that doors were being opened over the whole complex. He was quickly foiled. A van with a mattress in it was later discovered outside our flat, so everything pointed to a kidnapping of the kind that was a common occurrence in Spain at the time. I didn't know anything about his motive, and I wasn't interested in it. I never tried to find out. So,
Wow.
scary time.
Mm.
Scary time for him. You can only imagine what that does. And at the time, he wasn't allowed to talk about it at all. And the media started blaming his wife, saying she was an evil mastermind behind taking him away from the team, which I just can't imagine being in that scenario.
No. I mean, family does come first at moments like that, but yeah, when the media gets on top of you like that, that must be awful. I mean, one benefit, I guess, to him is it's not as bad as social media these days, but
yeah,
it was still horrific at the time.
Yeah, all over the papers. Just another quote from him, how it felt to live at them times. The police slept in our house for 3 or 4 months. I was going to matches with a bodyguard. All these things change your point of view towards many things, and there are moments in life in which there are other values. We wanted to stop this and be a little bit more sensible. It was that moment that I decided to leave football, and I couldn't play in the World Cup after this.
Wow.
Still plays club football until the end of the season, but Cruyff retired in 1978.
At what age?
He would have been 32.
Wow.
No, 31. 31. He always had in his head, for some reason, he would retire by the age of 31. But after losing most of his money in a series of poor investments, including a pig breeding scheme that were counselled by a scam artist, Cruyff and his family moved to the United States. And he didn't tell Danny at all that he was investing in this. And
He wasn't telling her any porkies.
No, he wasn't telling her any porkies. And Cor was in Amsterdam. He would normally be his financial advisor and things like that, so they just didn't know. As he recalled, I had lost millions in pig farming, and that was the reason why I decided to be a footballer again. He insisted his decision to resume playing in the United States was pivotal in his career. It was wrong, a mistake to quit playing at 31 with the unique talent I possessed, and adding that starting from zero in America, many miles away from my past, was one of the best decisions I made, and that's where I learned how to develop my uncontrolled ambitions to think as a coach and about sponsorship. And Cor tore into him when he found out that he had been investing in this pig farming scheme. So
it's an odd choice. It's a very odd choice to retire for family reasons and then delve into the pigs.
Innit?
I have to say, I was not expecting that turn. I'm not sure if people listening were, but I mean that was a very ironically very unexpected turn from the man who is well known for his own turn.
I'm sure he's known for his playing antics, his management, and
I wonder if there's people out there who only know him for the pig farming.
There's no way. But he never had a pig farm, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, that explains a lot then.
Separately, in 1979, Cruyff and Michels leave Barcelona to join LA Aztecs, which is the team at the time that George Best played for.
Wow.
Not at the time, a little bit before. Johan scores 14 in 22 appearances, age 33, and LA Aztecs finished second. As he was leaving Barcelona, he was a big proponent of the setup of La Masia. Of course, their youth academy set up right now that has a campus, education, and things like that for the people involved with the academy, so that it's not just about football, and as people, they're getting the development as well. Because, of course, a lot of the La Masia prospects aren't going to make it, unfortunately, and you need to have something to back up onto. Or when you retire, what are you going to do after you retire as a footballer? Especially in those days, could you retire on the wages you were making? It was getting towards that point. Cruyff gets an NASL, which is the North American Soccer League, Player of the Year, and Mikkels leaves for the role of technical director at FC Köln at this point. Cruyff leaves and he joins Washington Diplomats, playing 5 times only and scoring twice. And his new neighbour is Robert McNamara. Do you know who that is?
No.
The Secretary of Defence under John F. Kennedy. So I was thinking, when I saw that, I recognised that name 100%. And the Washington Diplomats really were diplomatic. It was the Kennedy's wives that had helped him find that house and buy it. So he learned apparently a lot about his management and the runnings of the club in his time at the United States. But Johan goes back to the Netherlands to play 3 friendlies for FC Dordrecht. He doesn't stay with them, but he almost signs for Leicester, who at the time were bottom of Division 1. And Arsenal and an unnamed German club were in for him. But after 3 weeks, they just couldn't agree terms. And so Cruyff went and joined Levante in the 2nd Division of Spain instead. Leicester that year got relegated with Norwich and Crystal Palace, who finished bottom. Who survived relegation in 1980-81, do you reckon?
Is it a big team? Is it going to be like Man United or something?
Have a guess.
I'm going to bet on Man United.
It's Brighton and Hove Albion, man. I can't believe that coming from you.
Well, I know we were relegated in '83, so I mean it was a fair guess, but
it was close. Cruyff scored twice in 10 appearances with Levante, and they didn't get promoted, and he fell out with the club administration, and so he goes back to Washington Diplomats. It sounds like he's not an agreeable guy at all, and he had this philosophy that he would be really combative, and apparently that was a really bad influence in the end on the Dutch national team, who would just argue with everything. In 81-82, he goes back to Ajax. Ajax finished 2nd the year before, and he's getting paid the maximum amount a Dutch player can, but he's being taxed 70%, which is what the tax rate was at the time on a player's wages in the Netherlands. But Cor and Ajax, Cor being his father-in-law, agree a pension plan where ticket income beyond the average attendance of last year gets split between Ajax and Cruyff's pension. And Ajax win the title the next year, which makes the attendances incredibly high, and he earns quite a bit of money. On his return, in 16 appearances, he gets 7 goals and 9 assists. He's playing alongside a 19-year-old called Frank Rijkaard, if you've ever heard of him, and a 17-year-old called Marco van Basten.
Not too bad.
This is at the age of 35, and he's playing centre mid at this point. 82-83, at the age of 36, they finish top of the league. He plays 30 times, gets 9 goals, 6 assists, and they win the domestic cup as well. But they get knocked out of the UCL in the first round by Celtic. At this point, Ajax don't offer Johan a new contract because they don't like how much money he's earning with this new pension scheme, and they don't give him a new contract. He gets pissed off. He joins Ajax's rivals Feyenoord.
How could he? How could he after all those battlings in the 60s and 70s for the title?
Innit?
Disgraceful.
Johan hears the Ajax board saying he's too old and fat, and that he's still putting on weight. So at the age of 37, he plays 44 times and scores 13 goals, which I believe is all but one games, and that's the third most games he played in a single season in his career. But the season starts with an 8-2 loss to Ajax, which you can only imagine.
I want a ticket for that game.
They do win the league though, and Ajax finish third. He's playing alongside a fairly talented player you might have heard of in Ruud Gullit.
Yeah, it rings a bell, that one.
And that's his last year. He retires. So just to summarise, this doesn't include cups either. 518 appearances, 294 goals. In his first spell at Ajax, 245 appearances, 193 goals. Which is just mental. Just mental. So going back to it, the best 14 to ever win. Or to ever to wear the shirt 14 between Thierry Henry and him. It's a little bit closer.
After you've told me that, he probably deserves it, to be fair.
Do you reckon?
Yeah.
It's a tough one. It's a really tough one. Right. His coaching career starts. Do you know where he started in his coaching career? Have a guess.
No, but I think it must be Ajax.
It is Ajax. So in the 85-86 season, he takes Ajax and they finish second. They fail to win because PSV Eindhoven have a ridiculous season where they only lose one game. And Ajax had an 85 goal difference as well compared to PSV's 78.
We know what the reception was like from the Ajax fans after he left them for Feyenoord.
I can't imagine.
For a short amount of time. It must have not been great. I mean, to be fair, he's a legend. But I mean, that is really stabbing them in the back in his last year. Isn't it? Yeah.
I've got no idea. I can imagine. But there was the stadium for Feyenoord is like twice the size. And he had exactly the same setup with raising the average attendance goes into his team, and they hit like 55,000 people. I think was the record attendance at one of the games. It's just mad.
Yeah.
But with his coaching career, I've along the way, I've got some players that he's coached. So going back to Ajax, gonna have some familiar names in Frank Rijkaard, Marco van Basten. Marco van Basten being 20 at this point, he scores 37 goals in the league in 34 games, which is just madness. And Ronald Koeman is playing in defence at 21 years old. That season they do win the cup though, so it's not completely trophyless. And in the 86-87 season, they finished second again. PSV beating them to it. PSV only losing 2 games to Ajax's 6 that year. They just have a ridiculous league form across the 2 years. 2 players in that season that were playing for PSV that were quite notable are Ruud Gullit, of course, still there. But Ronald Koeman. Ronald Koeman leaves Ajax and goes to play for them. But Marco van Basten stays and he scores 31 goals in 34, being the top goal scorer. And PSV at the time, managed by Gus Hiddink. Does that name should ring a bell?
Yeah. Former Chelsea manager and all that.
Yeah, so he's coached Real Madrid, Chelsea. At the moment, he's the assistant for Australia. So just a little bit on him that I've got. Hiddink took over in March 1987 when the team were behind Ajax by 3 points with 10 matches left. And they managed to win the championship 6 points ahead of Ajax in that. So he had an incredible start with them. And his first ever management role was with PSV as well. This was it. He was just the assistant before. And at PSV, he led the team to its first ever European Cup triumph and the treble.
Wow.
And won the League Cup up until 1989. Even after Gullit leaves in the 87-88 season for
Barca.
AC Milan.
Yeah.
Ajax win the cup though, and the Cup Winners' Cup. And they signed Danny Blind, which is the father of Daley Blind. And a young striker's coming through the youth system by the name of Dennis Bergkamp.
Wow.
At the age of 17. So as I was saying, Gus Hiddink's having a ridiculous impact at the moment on PSV. 87-88 season, they finished top again. They do it incredibly well. And the top departures at this time of Ajax is Marco van Basten out for AC Milan. So Ajax set fees at that time for all of their players, but a billionaire bought AC Milan. And because the fee's so small, they just take Marco van Basten. And Marco van Basten costs 10 times less than Hullet costs, which is just, they're not getting a lot of money. He wasn't too happy because Ajax have a policy where they use the money to replace a player from their Eredivisie. And the other teams would just hire him from wherever at this point, when Cruyff doesn't improve from it. Because of this recruitment policy, he doesn't feel like he can bring in the character that Van Basten had as a star, as a captain. And so he goes to Rijkaard and asked him to be his captain. And at this point, he's demanding that he becomes a lot less passive. And due to these conversations, Rijkaard completely loses interest in Ajax, and he leaves to go and play for Sporting CP in Portugal. And interestingly, though, I've not heard of him. They do manage to bring in a free transfer for Frank Stapleton from Manchester United.
Never heard of him.
No, I've never heard of either.
From Manchester United?
Yeah, he was just a free transfer. Wasn't bought.
Yeah.
I don't think they bought anyone. That time they don't win the UEFA Cup Winners' Cup or the Domestic Cup. And the board start to get a lot more intrusive on Johan's role. And after returning back from a skiing trip, he decides to resign. He's got a record of disagreeing with people, being really difficult to get on with. So it's like he says that the Rijkaard thing wasn't poorly managed, and he only had to fast track him to captain because he wanted this guy to step up, and he couldn't sign anyone else. But you look at it and you think surely that could have been slightly better managed. Mikkels at the time was coaching the Dutch national team. And I think by the sounds of it, the players had a much better relationship with him than they did with Cruyff. At that point, though, he accepts a management role at... Do you know where he went?
Barca.
He did go Barca. Yeah, he went back to Barcelona 88-89 season. After El Moti del Hesperia, which was a player rebellion against their president, Jose Luis Nunez Clemente. And the reason it's called the Rebellion, or El Moti del Hesperia, is the hotel was called Hesperia, which ended in the dismissal of 14 out of the 26 squad members and their coach. So he comes in to do a rebuild, and he starts building what's known as the Dream Team, which is a golden era for Barca. And he also revamps La Masia to now involve a solid academic education for the people inside the academy. There was an Englishman playing for Barcelona at the time, Gary Lineker, of course, and Gary Lineker decides to stay. At this point, Barcelona had finished 6th the previous year, and Madrid had won 5 back-to-back titles. The players that he brings in, and he brings in quite a few because he has to, he's lost the majority of his squad. He signs Ernesto Valverde, Miguel Soler, Jose Mari Baccaro, Chiqui Bergstein, Ricardo Serma, Alozi, Julio Salinas, Eusebio, not that Eusebio, he's a Spanish midfielder, Juan Carlos Unze, Luis Lopez Ricarte, Manolo Hierro, which is the only one of these I've heard of, Julio Cesar Romero, Louis Miller, Jordi Rora, and Guillermo Amor. So these names, I've heard of one. Of course, Hierro goes on to be a fantastic player at centre-back. But they're players that have not really gone down in the legacy, necessarily, of Barcelona. And they spent a lot of money as well. Bearing in mind, when he transferred to Barcelona, he was a world record fee of $2 million. He's spending, on Ernesto Valverde at centre-forward, $1.5 million. He's spending a lot of money on this team, bringing people in from other Spanish clubs, and then a couple from Brazil as well. And they win the Cup Winners' Cup, beating Sampdoria in the final, which is basically the Europa League of nowadays. It's the cup that's just below the UCL.
Yeah.
In 89-90 season, he brings in Ronald Koeman, Michael Laudrup, and he loans out Manolo Hierro, so he's not playing at this point. And Gary Lineker leaves for Tottenham Hotspur at that point. Barcelona finished third behind Real Madrid and Valencia. But they do win the Copa del Rey, beating Real Madrid. If you were the board or the president, would you sack Johan Cruyff at this point? So he spent all of his money. He's finished third. He does win the Copa del Rey.
It's a different time though. They gave managers a lot more time back then. If it was modern day, he'd be gone. Absolutely would be gone. No.
You wouldn't?
No,
okay.
No.
That's probably the right decision as well, because in the 1991 season they do win their La Liga title, beating Atletico Madrid, and it wasn't close as well. There was 10 points with him. For some reason on these tables, even though they got 25 wins, they only got 57 points. I'm not too sure.
It's because back then a win was 2 points and not 3.
Well, in that case, it's even more impressive that they won by 10 points. Arrivals: Stoichkov, Nando, and Carles Busquets. Carles Busquets being the father of Sergio Busquets. In the 91-92 season, Barcelona win again. So bearing in mind, in the last 31 years before him, they've only won 4 titles. This is his second.
Wow.
And they beat Real Madrid by 1 point. They bring in Miguel Angel Nadal. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I've only heard of Nadal, the tennis player.
Exactly, because Nadal, the tennis player, is his nephew.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he also promotes a Pep Guardiola from the youth academy that
Who?
season. I don't know.
Who? I've never heard of him.
I don't know. He didn't come from a big club. Barca's second. But they win the Champions League and the Supercopa. And during the same season, Cruyff has a double bypass heart surgery. And that's put down to his heavy smoking habit. After this point, instead of smoking, I don't know if you've seen it, but he started sucking lollipops instead.
No. But fair
I've
enough.
never seen that since. The 92-93 season, Barcelona beat Real Madrid again. They win the UEFA Super Cup and the Supercopa, but they do get knocked out of the Champions League by CSKA Moscow. And then in the 93-94 season, they win again. Real Madrid finish 4th. Interestingly, they finish on the same points as Deportivo La Coruña, winning the league on goal difference. But have you ever seen them so high?
You'd hate to support them, wouldn't you? In terms of looking back to the history and seeing they finish second.
It's because they missed a penalty as well.
No.
Yeah. Apparently. It's because they missed a penalty. They didn't get the points needed. So, although this is the 4th title Barcelona had managed to get in 4 years, bearing in mind Barcelona had only got 4 prior in 31 years, they were very lucky to get that one. But a couple of arrivals: Romario from PSV Eindhoven, a centre forward. I'm sure you've heard of him from Brazil, and Oscar Garcia, at the age of 20, comes into the first team from Barcelona. Of course, one of the most underrated managers in Brighton's history.
Do you want me to give the chant? No. Oscar Garcia.
I don't think you'd actually do it.
He drinks. I won't finish. It's fine.
No, I mean,
what a legend.
He's famous for Brighton fans because he took over after Gus Poyet. At the time, Gus Poyet told us without backing, there was no way we were raising the table. And he managed to get into the playoffs with Jake Foster-Caskey in midfield, which was just scenes.
Leonardo Jor's goal against Forest.
Huge.
Never forget. Never.
Anyway, in the same season, in the final of the Champions League, he's got a really famous quote pre-match. Barca are the favourites. We're more complete, competitive, and experienced than them. Milan are nothing out of this world. And they go on to lose 4-0 to AC Milan in the final, which you just can't imagine, can you? Imagine that nowadays. In the 94-95 season, Barcelona finished fourth. Real Betis finished third. In second, Deportivo La Coruña.
Oh, not again! Not again!
Real Madrid they miss out by 4 points.
Oh,
it's just mad. Like I never knew they ever got that high, and I just can't imagine.
Deportivo. That is just absolute agony, isn't it?
The arrivals that year for Barcelona: Hadji, Jordi Cruyff coming up and playing in a debut which he scored in, and Julian Lopetegui comes in as well. The goalkeeper, who at the moment, of course, is the coach of Wolves. Wolves loving their goalkeeper.
Well, he's left now, but yeah, he's left.
Yeah, you're right.
They lost
Laudrup and Romario. Laudrup going to Real Madrid that year. So he gets knocked out of the Champions League first round, knocked out of the Copa del Rey in the first round, loses the Super Copa, finishes fourth in the league. Would you sack him?
Yes. Now I'd sack him. I'll probably be wrong too because you're about to tell me something amazing, but I'd sack him then.
Well, we'll find out. In the 95-96 season, he signs 9 players, but most notably including Meho Kodro, who's the current manager of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Wait, Herzegovina? Herzegovina, yeah. And Luis Figo. If you've ever heard of him. He was an alright player. They lose Stoichkov and Koeman. Koeman goes to Feyenoord, and they finish third. Atletico Madrid winning that league. Valencia finishing second. Not too sure where Real Madrid went. But would you sack him? Yeah, you probably would, because you sacked him last year. Yeah. And with 11 trophies, Cruyff was the most successful manager in their history, and also the longest serving. But he falls out with Nunes. Well, he never really got on with Nunes, but it gives Nunes the excuse now to sack him. And Cruyff finds out through a newspaper. He doesn't even get told. He finds out days before that this is happening. And, of course, at the moment, he's not the most successful manager. Pep Guardiola is. He's now won 15 trophies, but he's still the longest-serving manager they've ever had. And do you know who stepped in to replace him?
What year was this? 90?
95. Well, it'd be 96, 97.
96.
Is an English.
No, English.
Mm-hmm.
I was not expecting that.
Bobby Robson, and Jose Mourinho as his assistant.
Really? Wow.
I mean, apart from that, he had a coaching role as the Catalonia national team coach between 2009 and 13. But that's it now for his coaching career. Just interesting though, in terms of his influence on Barcelona still, he supports this guy called Joan Laporta, who ends up taking over from Nunes as president in 2003, and he unofficially advised him. But Laporta also had Sandro Rosell officially advising him, which is an important name. Cruyff recommends Frank Rijkaard as the manager, and Laporta picks him up. Rijkaard ends up getting back-to-back leagues as well as winning a Champions League. But after that, they ended up having a pretty poor drop in form. And Johan pushes Laporta to hire Pep Guardiola, even though critics pointed at his lack of experience. And Pep beat Jose Mourinho, who really wanted the role. And at that point, Nunes got back in as president 2 years into Pep Guardiola's stints. But of course, Pep Guardiola, his influence, there was no way he was getting sacked. And Cruyff was given the title of honorary president by Laporta, and then Sandro Rosell gets in, and he strips it straight away. Who, of course, is the guy that officially advised Laporta. So I don't know whether there was a bit of jealousy or something going on there.
Must have been.
Johan Cruyff did return to Ajax as technical director, but it ends up being quite rocky. In 2008, whilst he was still coach of the national team, I believe, with Catalonia, he was agreed to come back, or he was reported to come back, but he had professional disagreements with Marco van Basten, which was Ajax's manager at the time, so he withdrew his return. Of course, before, I'm pretty sure I spoke about Mikkels involving Cruyff in all of his pre-match discussions, all of his tactics, and he's talking about tactics and philosophies. And Johan Cruyff used to involve Marco van Basten, Pep Guardiola into the same things because he thought it was really useful for his development as a coach. But yeah, he falls out with Van Basten. It says professional disagreements in the book. I also saw a report that it was at a party at Cruyff's mansion in Barcelona that something went down. So I'm not 100% sure.
I think I believe that one.
Yeah. Johan Cruyff does go back to Ajax and join the board of advisors to rejuvenate the youth academy, but ends up taking Ajax to court because he's supposed to be a consultant. They make Louis van Gaal the CEO, and he ends up going to court. He gets the move blocked, and it obviously didn't make him popular because he left the board in 2012 because of a quarrel. So doesn't surprise me at all. Not necessarily an agreeable guy, and he's disagreeing with people. Just out there in 2012, he signed a 3-year deal to become the technical director at Guadalajara, and he got sacked after 11 months. And it's just a bit random, but he did it. And throughout his life, as I said, Cruyff was a heavy smoker, and he died of lung cancer 24th of March 2016 at the age of 68. So it was a journey. Some of the players that he managed obviously have gone on to do great things. Lopetegui, Guardiola,
Mourinho.
to name a few.
Well, he was obviously associated with Mourinho for a bit as well.
Yeah, although one of the segments I've told you that I've got is quotes. I've just got quotes from him. The second one, Jose Mourinho is a negative coach. He only cares about the result and does not care much for good football. So how well he got on with Jose Mourinho's,
Well, swings and roundabouts, There must be some good times.
You'd hope so, wouldn't you? Though he did come in, what was he doing before? No, I swear he came in as a translator at Barcelona with Ross.
At Barca.
So
yeah,
I don't think he would have been there when Cruyff was there.
Okay.
So, one of his other quotes, quality without results is pointless, results without quality is boring. Of course, you know how much I love Samba players to the point where it's just like pointless because you're not getting the points. So many English fans just go, well, it's all about the result that matters. But I think a lot of people forget that football's just entertainment at the end of the day, and it's just fun, If you're playing with talent, it's like the best things to watch. The next one's... I got these from the Football Faithful, so I love this one. In my teams, the goalie is the first attacker and the striker is the first defender. That's one that when I'm coaching, I push onto the kids. Like I didn't.
That's what I've heard before.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's one that everyone, well, not everyone, but most people have heard of it. Rings true, and it's definitely something that Pep Guardiola has taken over at City. And. Yeah, I think it's even more crucial in modern football. I think that's why he was so ahead of his time. With you see goalkeepers now passing out from the back, and attackers running, pressing as early as they can to get the ball back. So yeah, I think it's amazing how ahead of his time he was.
100%, and it's so relevant and such a different way of seeing football. It obviously plays really well into the total football system where there's sweepers and things like that, playing centre back. It's just so ahead of its time. Here's another one. Why couldn't you beat a richer club? I've never seen a bag of money score a goal. I'm not sure how much I agree with that one.
I mean, Chelsea these days. Fair enough.
True.
Yeah.
True. I like this one. Technique is not being able to juggle a ball 1,000 times. Anyone can do that by practicing. Then you can work in the circus. Technique is passing the ball with one touch with the right speed at the right foot of your teammate. Pass appreciation. Pass appreciation being how you can pass to your players so that they can play off their first touch, or so that they don't have to control the ball and playing optimally. Something we coach nowadays, and it's such a crucial detail for any footballer looking to play at a decent level. It's just so ahead of the time. It's so interesting to have seen this after the fact, from the coaching background rather than finding them through him in the first place, because it's just so relevant. Players today can shoot with their laces. I could shoot with the inside laces and outside of both feet. In other words, I'm 6 times better than today's players. Not full of himself at all.
You got to respect it, man. You got to respect it. Like some people, like Messi's so humble, but like this guy is just going around saying he's better than everyone. I mean, you got to respect it. You just got to.
I find it terrible when talents are rejected based on computer stats. Based on the criteria at Ajax now, I would have been rejected. When I was 15, I couldn't kick a ball 15 metres with my left and maybe 20 with my right. My qualities, technique and vision are not detectable by a computer. Any thoughts?
I think I quite disagree about that, obviously, one, because I think data is quite a big, important part of football today. But yeah, I mean, he is correct in terms of that he might be rejected these days now because it is so tough to get in and so tough to make the top level. Yeah. And so obviously it's brilliant he wasn't rejected, because we wouldn't have had the legend that he is. But yeah, no, I disagree with the fact that I think there is an element of statistical data that needs to be included in football these days. But yeah,
it's difficult because he's throughout his coaching career he had a good reputation for being able to see talent, and also for his attacking style. Not everyone can see all of this talent coming through. You know, you don't find out about players like Darwin Núñez, like using XA, XG, XGOT, XR. Like that's why Benfica picked him up, and he was so successful for Benfica. And then, of course, a massive move.
And we've mentioned, you must have guessed that we support Brighton by how much we've talked about it so far. But we are the best run club in the country, right? And without our statistical analysis behind that, and Tony Bloom running the club the way he does, we wouldn't be finding the players we are and continuing to find them. So there has to be an element of it.
We're definitely the best run club, for a club that's not massive. I mean, it's difficult to argue that Man City isn't a really well-run club.
Well, yeah, true.
With the talent that they bring in, of course, Doku's been reported to come in for £60 million, which no one else has gone in for as well. They're replacing the talent that's already gone, and they've been so dominant.
But pound for pound.
In terms of sustainability, it's difficult to say Brighton aren't what Benfica have been.
Yeah, exactly.
The Premier League version. The next quote: "If I wanted you to understand it, I would have explained it better." Great. And the last one from Football Faithful. "Someone who has juggled the ball in the air during a game, after which 4 defenders of the opponent get time to run back. That's the player people think is great. I say he has to go to a circus." Like, you know...
He's loving the circus, isn't he? Yeah. He's loving it. He loves animals. He loves his pigs. He loves the circus. And he thinks he's the best thing since sliced bread. So
yeah.
What more can we say about the man?
He was massively arrogant, and he always gave off that he thought he was the best. But to be fair, listening to Ivan Toney speak recently to the Richard Bartlett podcast, have you seen that?
Yeah, Stephen Bartlett, you mean?
Stephen Bartlett. He speaks about having that mentality, even if you're not the best player on the pitch, that you're going to be the best player on the pitch and helping in there. And the mentality does go a long way in terms of your confidence to play. And you see the best players of it. I mean, even when we had Basuma, when he was playing with confidence, he was ridiculous. Like, you see him playing for Spurs now, he's still ridiculous, and he always had that. He's the best player in the league. Me.
Yeah.
Like, it's maybe one of the reasons why he was so successful. I don't agree about the circus bit. You know, I love that pointless stuff that's just entertaining. I love the Adel Tarabs, you know.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
the
yeah.
hat and Ben Arthur's. I just find it so
Yeah.
exciting, just
The
unpredictable,
streets don't
mercurial talent.
forget.
The streets don't
The
forget at
streets
all.
don't forget.
And it's so
No.
entertaining, and
Yeah.
you never want to lose grip of this. I've got lose sight. I've got a couple as well
Mm.
from Kid Adol. Choose the best player for every position, and you'll end up not with the strong 11, but with 11 strong ones. Potentially outdated now, because Man City, arguably man for man, have the best team in the Premier League.
Yeah, without doubt.
And every single player is in there for the debate for being the best player in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Even Kyle Walker. Like,
Mm.
I understand you've got players like Hakimi, but at 33 years old, what Walker's able to do is still just crazy. You know, Aymeric
Yeah.
Laporte, is there an argument for him being the best centre back in the world? 100%. Edison. I mean, you don't even have to get to people like Haaland.
That's the thing. A person like Laporte, he possibly is on his way out. It's just mental, the depth that City have in all those positions. But
And what's crazy
yeah.
is his own the player that he developed tactically in Pep Guardiola that's doing this, that sort of disproves his own quote. And he also says, which I think is an interesting one to leave it on. I'll be interested to see Barcelona when Busquets is no longer in the squad. I think everyone will be shocked by the change it will bring about. I also think Busquets is going to become a good coach. And do you think they're going to struggle?
I think it's one of those positions where, I mean, again, we've seen it with Caicedo leaving. It's a position where it's so hard to replace in world football. And I think it is probably the most underrated position in terms of success and failure, whether you've got a good number 6.
I think it's underrated though.
No, in terms of like,
I don't necessarily disagree. Yeah. We saw even teams like Wolves, their midfield is just it's really good. Their defense and their attack just isn't quite as close. But the players that they've got there at the moment, I thought they would struggle a lot less. A lot more without their big man that left.
Because everyone talks about having a goalkeeper, a good a leader at centre back, and obviously the goal scorer. So that's why I said I think it's quite underrated, because people think you can just fix a team's problem by getting another goal scorer or a leader at the back. And I guess that's what a CDM is really. But I think it is a very underrated position.
Even talking about the big man Ruben Neves, the goals that he scored for Wolves were just huge. There was a point where he was scoring every 4 games, I swear.
He was top goal scorer last season.
Was he?
For them.
Yeah. It's like when Lewis Dunk was our top goal scorer. It's just not a good sign,
No, not at all.
It's
one thing I want.
Come on.
So I said one thing I wanted to say overall about Cruyff. I think what I've learned today mostly is, even though he was a very disagreeable person, it seems, the people that did get on with him, his biggest quality was respect from his upbringing, and he just seemed, when you got to know him, quite a humble guy. Obviously, he's got a big ego, but in terms of he's very simplistic, and he loves the basics of life. And I think respect. If you respected him and he respected you, that was the most important thing about the relationship between you two, because I think you had to fully trust him, a bit like Guardiola now these days. I think if you fully buy into it and you fully trust the man, and they see that in you as well, I think that's where it works. And I think that's what I've learned today most about him is from I had this sort of vision of this very good player, obviously, and I knew that he was a good coach and I knew he revolutionised football. But learning about the man himself, it seems like he's gone through a lot, and yet, even though he thinks he's the best thing in the world, he's still a family man, and I think respect is a very important thing to him.
Yeah, for sure. You can just see so many things that he talks about. Of course, he was a big proponent of redeveloping the Ajax Youth Academy, and the Dutch, what the world was starting to model their stuff off. Spain had a lot of influence by the Dutch, and then the English modelled their stuff off Spain. I do agree with what you're saying. I think he wasn't 100% right in everything, of course. I don't think anyone necessarily is. It's tricky. It's a tricky one because you don't really know how influential or how good he really is at that time when the competition was a lot less. Of course, he had seasons where he wasn't scoring as much at Barcelona. Could have been for the reasons, as you said, that were just outside of football that were affecting him. It's peculiar how much of an influence one person can have on football. And Arsene Wenger speaks highly about him. Beckenbauer speaks highly about him as being the best. Even his son. His son didn't have the best career, but his son, after Cruyff left Barcelona, he was sort of excluded as well, wasn't? And he managed to get a move to Manchester United. So he played for 4 seasons. He picked up a knee injury that needed surgery at Barcelona, and unfortunately the surgeon did a botched job on it, and it sort of ruined his ability to recover properly, and it was always causing him issues. But his best friend down here was Roberto Martinez at the time, and then went and played under Roberto Martinez as well. And now he's the president of Barcelona, I believe, Johan Cruyff. So a lot of people that have been near him and picked up stuff by him have just been so successful in football that it's really difficult to argue with his talent. Whether he comes across as one of the best of all time as a player is tricky as well. He was obviously a superstar talent, but the numbers that I was saying for Van Basten when he was playing for Ajax were the same. In fact, I think he finished top goal scorer more at Ajax than
the thing is. I think it's indisputable that if you combine his playing career and managing career, he's the best of all time. Like, obviously, we still got players like Messi and Ronaldo who haven't retired yet, who we don't know what they're going to be doing in their future. But I think of everyone who's had their playing career and had their managerial career finished, he has to be the best of all time. Yes, I'd say maybe Zidane. You could maybe put in the argument.
Yeah.
But I think I personally think. Obviously, I didn't know too much about him before today, but from what he's done as a player, from what he's done as a manager, and for what he's done for football in general, I think he has to be the greatest of all time. So I think, and if you've got people like Arsene Wenger saying that, then I think you can't really disagree.
I want to end on a couple of things. The first one is he's got a favourite 11. He plays a 3-4-3. I want you to pick a 3-4-3 of the player that you think, a player that you think is better. Just a player who's playing currently that you think is better or comparable.
This is going to be, you throw me under the bus here. It's going to be quite controversial.
I didn't want you to think about it at all. In fact, I want you to pick the most similar player of the modern game like this person.
Okay.
Right. His goalkeeper, Lev Yashin, of course, Yugoslavia goalkeeper.
Manuel Neuer.
You reckon?
Yeah.
Did Lev Yashin use his feet at all? Like, I thought he was just a cat.
No, but I say Neuer because of the presence. I think maybe you could say like Peter Schmeichel.
Can you say like
back in the sort of 90s and 2000s?
A Jan Sommer nowadays?
Yeah, potentially. But if I'm a striker and I'm coming up against the keeper, I think the one I'm most scared of is Manuel Neuer. He might not be the best technically still, but I think just for his legacy that he's left, I'd say Neuer.
He plays, of course, a back three, but because of his fluid styles, he plays with 2 fullbacks / wing backs either side of a centre half. The centre half is Franz Beckenbauer. And this was one that I was thinking, I can't think of a player like Franz Beckenbauer at all. No,
I mean, because I think centre half. Yeah, potentially, because you got to think about somebody who's just an all round leader. I I mean, Van Dijk in his prime, but I don't think he ties Beckenbauer's shoelaces.
Do you know what? I think Van
No.
Dijk in his prime was a good player.
Yeah, but people talk about Beckenbauer as being like the all-round centre back, like the best centre back of all time. So I think it is hard. Maybe Maldini, but again, he's not playing now.
Yeah, I think Maldini is not quite the same player, is it?
No.
I just don't think there's a player like him. I don't know if there's the potential for another player like him either, just because it was a different time. The system that he played was a lot more different, a lot less structured than what we've got today. But his fullbacks either side, Ruud Krul, who played with him at Ajax, and Carlos Alberto as the other side. If you were going to put two fullbacks / centre backs either side of, who did you say? Who was your centre back? Prime Van Dijk.
I said Van Dijk. Yeah.
Who are you putting next to Van Dijk that can move forwards with the ball as well? Who are similar players to that sort of style of football?
So you said Carlos Alberto's to the right of him.
Mm.
I would probably go Trent then. I know Trent's more of a midfielder nowadays, but in terms of technique on the ball, I don't think there's anyone better in the world at that sort of position than Trent. Yes, defensively.
I do.
Who?
Hakimi.
True.
Such a better player than Trent. Trent would be.
See, this is why I'm going to get roasted. This is why I'm going to get roasted. I just, it's my opinion. Right.
I think it's obvious. Fullback, centre back, still a fantastic player. Kyle Walker for England.
Yeah.
He could play anywhere, and you could argue like a Zinchenko on the left hand side. But there's definitely been players that have played left back and roles like centre mid. Obviously not left back, but Philip Lahm, Kimmich, them sort of models I think would be a good one. But staying out wide, left backs that can go forward, but are good at staying back. It's a really tricky one. People like Alphonso Davies are just really wingers that are playing there.
Yeah.
And don't really have that defensive quality.
No, I think the last true left back the world had, I said the world had. I think the best left back in the sort of last 20 years was Ashley Cole. 30 years. Yeah.
I can't really
argue. There's Jordi Alba wasn't there at Barca, but I think
he was a very good player, Ashley Cole. Of course, his record sticks up for him. Then that being said, players like Ashley Young have had a long career. Andrew Robertson, of course, he's had a dip in form recently, but he's a proper left back.
Yeah.
As far as the proper left backs go. But let's move on to the other ones. Pep Guardiola is his holding midfielder / anchor.
Rodri.
You reckon Rodri's like Pep?
Yeah. Or is Busquets still playing, or he's just retired, isn't he?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Pep Guardiola is sort of. Part of me, I think it's undervaluing Pep Guardiola, but part of me wants to say like a Højbjerg or a Casemiro. Casemiro is more. It's a tough one, isn't it?
No, I think Rodri fits it perfectly, because I think.
Do you think?
I think Casemiro is a bit more. He's a bit more out there. He's a bit of Rodri is one of those players that I think you just slot in any team in the world and he makes them better, but silently. Whereas Casemiro is just he's all about himself. He's a bit more egotistical, and I don't think Pep Guardiola as a player definitely was that. Because I think Rodri fits the role quite. I'm not just saying that because the City links, and obviously he's Spanish as well, but I think he just is that sort of the new Pep in that role.
Okay, I definitely disagree with him being a quiet player, because he scores bangers like quite often.
No, but
on the ball so much. I don't think he's a silent player, but I see what you're trying to say.
No, but what I'm saying is he doesn't big himself up about it, whereas Casemiro has more of an ego. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, he might be involved in the action, Rodri, but I think he's got to be one of those underrated City players of the last sort of 5 years in terms of his contribution to the team.
Maybe, I don't know. I think he's up there with the best of all time in that role. I think that's a difficult claim to dispute. Obviously, there's been some incredibly talented players in that role, but we can't look past what Man City are achieving. And as you said, he is a big part of it. I don't think anyone can dispute that.
He scored the winner in the Champions League, so yeah.
And it was a great goal as well for them. He plays with two. He plays playmaker, attacking midfielder, and striker. His attacking midfielder is Alfredo Di Stefano, who was a player that he idolised growing up. So, of course, he made his breakthrough in 1963. Alfredo Di Stefano played way before that. I don't expect you to know. So we're going to work around the other two. Bobby Charlton was his playmaker. Who's your Bobby Charlton?
That is a tough one because he's got a bit of a physical presence, Charlton, but he was also a very nimble player.
Who do you think the best playmaker in the world is?
Probably Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah, for sure.
But they're very different player types, though. So, but in terms of the role playmaker, definitely.
I think he's the best playmaker. I think, interestingly enough, if we're looking for a physical player that could play playmaker, Kudus does fit that role if Brighton have been linked to. Even if I don't particularly want him, he's definitely got that physical presence. It is a tricky one.
I guess maybe. I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily he's as gifted as a De Bruyne or Charlton potentially. I mean, that could be a bit of a hard take, but Odegaard's definitely got more of a physical presence. And he's in this current Arsenal system this season, he's dropping back a bit more. But last season especially, he was linking up the play beautifully, and he doesn't look. He's one of those players that doesn't really look like a physical player, but I think he's incredibly hard to get the ball off. Leon
Goretzka, physical midfielder, not really a playmaker though, is he?
No.
That's a tricky one. His second striker is Diego Maradona, so good luck finding a player that's like him. Because there aren't.
I mean, there's surely only one man. He's not as physical, but Lionel Messi.
Yeah, I mean, in a bit of a different role nowadays, but I mean, we don't have to speak about Diego Maradona because he would go on forever. In between Messi and Kevin De Bruyne. Is that who you were going to put in for Bobby Charlton or Odegaard?
I mean, well, the thing is, if you're going physique, I'd go Odegaard. But if you're going playmaker, just in general, I'd go De Bruyne.
All right, we'll go Odegaard and Messi. In between them is going to be an attacking midfielder. So who are you picking?
Okay.
Alfredo Di Stefano. I don't know too much on him, to be honest. I know he played for Real Madrid. No, he played for Ajax.
I guess what you could do then, if you're looking for an attacking midfielder, is just have De Bruyne with Messi and then put Odegaard in that role instead.
Okay.
I think that would work better.
Two wingers, Garrincha and Piet Kaiser. Kaiser, very fluid player by the sounds of it. More of a forward playing out wide. Obviously not a physical presence as the Dutch teams weren't necessarily, but he played anywhere on the left, basically, when Cruyff came back. I like to think Gareth Bale.
Son? Bale?
Ooh. Well, the reason I say Bale is because he really did play everywhere down that left-hand side. And including top, but of course Bale doesn't play anymore. He's recently retired.
I feel like Son's more of a forward, but I think because obviously because of his pace, he got put out wide because of Kane.
Yeah.
But I definitely think he's in behind Son. That's probably his best trait.
I think that's a good show. Garrincha? Who are you putting in for Garrincha?
I mean, it's one of the best wingers of all time, to be fair. I don't know, man. There's no one really like him. He was such a physical presence. And any names for you shouting out?
Leroy
Salah?
Sane?
Not really. Sane, yeah. Nabry?
Not in the same way. I don't think Nabry. I just think Leroy Sane being quite sturdy, especially when he used to play for Man City.
I think prime Salah, to be fair. I think Salah's dropped off a little, but I think a couple of seasons ago.
Salary for Garrincha makes sense in a modern setting.
Yeah,
and then you've
there's
got
different types of wingers right now. Right now, I'd say the best right winger in the world is probably Saka, but he's just completely physically. Okay. So you might disagree. Yeah, well, I'm throwing them out there.
The last position striker.
I'm holding back.
You've got to find the modern Pele.
Oh. Well, in terms of striker, there's only one name, Erling Haaland. But whether that fits the Pele role...
Not at all.
Not at all.
No, you're looking for really a second striker with a bit of flair, like João Felix. But obviously better than João Felix because Pele was...
What about Mbappe? Is Mbappe more of a winger, would you say?
I think Mbappe's not a bad shout at all. Of course, just the comparisons, what Mbappe's done in the World Cup final to Pele and being that man is, I think that's it. So which team wins? Which team wins a football match?
I mean, it's hard to obviously compare generationally, but I just think because of the advancements in football, which again is mainly down to the main man Cruyff that we've been talking about today, I think the modern team wins. It's just the technological differences that football has had and the impact that it has on the players. I think we're so much more advanced, and obviously one person we might delve into in the future is Arsene Wenger. His whole philosophy change of how he changed football from a more player point of view and dietary and all that. I just think modern footballers now, yes, that we can talk about the greats as they were and they stood out, but I think modern football right now is in its best. I think it's obvious. Like most things in life with technology, it just gets better, and I think the modern team would win, especially when we put I think the greatest player of all time in Messi in that squad. There's just no way the old boys are winning.
Yeah. Greatest player of all time is definitely debatable, especially with some of the people coming through now. But yeah, I don't disagree. I do think as good as players were like Bobby Charlton, Beckenbauer, it's a different game, and the amount of nutrition and physical development of these players is going to be difficult. I'd like to end it on a ranking system.
Okay.
So if you had to, on a tier list, going from greatest of all time. And then you've got in the starting 11 of all time, and that can mean anything. That could be in terms of the most influential people. If you're putting 11 influential people in, they would be in that. In a tier system, where are you putting Johan Cruyff?
The whole package, or just the player?
The whole package, the person.
The whole package, the person. Well, like I said earlier, about 20 minutes ago, I think he is categorically the greatest of all time in terms of everything he's done for football. I mean, the current greatest manager right now in Pep Guardiola, played under him, influenced by him, talks about him like he's some sort of god. I think he has to be the most influential person in world football. So for me, he's right at the top.
Cool. And in GOAT status?
He is in GOAT status, yes.
Better player than Messi, according to you?
Well, no. You said the whole package. If it was player alone, that's different. I'd say he's in the starting 11, but yeah.
Ooh,
I think
that's higher claim.
Yeah. No, I just hope that everyone at home really enjoyed that sort of deep dive into. Because as I said, I think we've discovered more about the man. I think the history books can say what he's won and what he's done, but I think that's the key thing about what we're trying to achieve with these episodes is learning about the person himself a bit more. And I think we've done very well today.
Let us know what you would like to hear about in terms of football stories. We can deep dive into people. We're also thinking about doing little things like looking at 4 short stories and trying to pick up some things that are not necessarily talked about. Or we could look at some people that are. Your input would be absolutely great. And please do like it if you enjoyed, because that would mean a lot. Puts us in the search engine optimization. And
Absolutely.
I've been Jake.
I've been Jack.
And bye-bye.
Bye-bye.